Sculpture for those that's being recorded. In the sculpture world, Gus and I ran into him by pure chance in Tucson in January. We were checking out the Tucson Sculpture Park, and here is this guy loading up a sculpture on his flatbed trailer with Texas plates. We got into a conversation, and it turns out that Mike's been involved in sculpture parks and creating sculpture spaces all over the country. Born in New Orleans and graduating from Southwest Texas University, he founded Sculpture for New Orleans. And I think, Harry, you and Peg may have seen that display in 2006. It was a citywide ongoing project to help revitalize the visual and art post-Katrina in New Orleans. He also was involved in the founding of the Hudson River Sculpture Trail, which is a trail from Haverstraw, New York to Saratoga Springs. His works are incorporated in or held by various corporations in New Orleans, Houston, Corpus Christi in New Jersey. His public displays can be found in Houston, Irving, Texas, and Corpus Christi as well. And a number of private homes have his collections in New Orleans, Houston, and Corpus Christi. So please welcome Mike Mangeris.
Mike, you're on mute, Mike, if you're speaking.
He's on mute.
Where is he?
Okay, now okay. All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name's Michael Mangeris and I live in South Texas, close or just north of Corpus Christi, Texas. If you guys know where that is, it's on the coast, about midway on the Texas coastal bend. I grew up in New Orleans. My folks moved to Houston when I was 8 and had all my education in Houston, then went to college and then moved down to the coast after college. And living in kind of a small area, population was about 300,000, forced me to travel quite a bit. So Europe, New York, a lot of places in California as far as my art is concerned, which really kind of gave me my foundation of doing public art, being able to visit different places. And I met Rick in Tucson, and we started to discuss a project that he was interested in presenting in y'all's neighborhood in the Dublin region. I have done about 10 sculpture parks for either cities or private collectors, and 4 or 5 city projects, the largest being in New Orleans. And the way that came about is I was represented by an art gallery in New Orleans who's Marguerite A. Stryker, and her husband was the president of the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, which was is the umbrella organization for Jazz Fest. And after Katrina, he had called me up and said most of the money was going to the musicians and if I could help out the artists, because he knew I did large city projects. And I agreed. We all pitched in some money and I started contacting my friends. And within 3 or 4 months, we had 37 sculptures installed. Of course, there was a lot of networking, letter writing, presentations, and so forth. This being the first presentation for you guys, multiply that by 20, 25. 4 or 5 trips to New Orleans. And the key there was I was able to meet with the director of the New Orleans Museum of Art, the president of Tulane, the president of Xavier, and the president of University of New Orleans. So I was able to go directly to the top, and they all said, we'll support you, anything you could do. Mind you, there was 30,000 people in the city of New Orleans. They had one engineer for the entire city, and I was working directly with the chief landscape architect of the city, this fellow by the name of Keith Bleachner. So with that group involved in my project, it was easy to move forward, and I raised the money at the time. There was no sense in going into New Orleans and asking people to help me out or raise money for my project. So all the artists had contributed their work. For instance, the Alexander Calder family sent in a sculpture and paid for the shipping and installation. Louise Bourgeois did the same thing. Bernard Venet did the same thing. These are top tier artists. And by bringing in the top tier artists, it brought back all the younger artists. So after about 3 or 4 years, 80% of the artwork that we had installed were younger artists, and everything was for sale. And ultimately, after 15 years, the project sold $3 million of art, 80% of which went directly to the artist. And when I was asked by David A. Stryker from the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, what's the best way to help artists? I said, get them money, help get them in the public eye and that sort of thing. So the project was very successful. And as a result of that, 2 or 3 other projects popped up, one being in Tucson and one being ongoing right now with the Texas A&M system. I'm placing sculptures throughout their campuses. And we're starting now installing at the Texas A&M branch in Corpus Christi, Texas. So that's pretty much a Cliff's Notes of what I do. I saw the park where you guys had thought about placing art, or Rick had mentioned, and the best way to get started is for me to come up and visit, look around, see what's going on, give you advice. If it works out, then I'll figure something out and make a presentation. If not, I'll pass you on to the next best person who could do something for you guys. In any event, I'll be happy to help. And questions?
The part where you indicate that the sculptures are made available for sale, have you replaced that sculpture that's sold with another new work, or is it just an empty plinth somewhere?
Can you speak up a bit, please?
Sorry, let me walk up. So I was just wondering, Mike, on the sculptures where you apparently offered them for sale and some were sold, do you have a sculpture plinth somewhere in New Orleans that a sculpture was removed from, and do you have a new artist lined up to put a replacement work in that location?
Yes, yes. On the Tulane campus, I worked directly with the sculpture professor and the dean of liberal arts, and we made a presentation. So they poured the bases, and we set all those sculptures in place. And if something sold or was moved and they didn't want a new piece in, they would remove the base and fill it back up with grass and such. And it was in the quad at Tulane. For instance, in the city on Poydras, which is the main business centers. It's called the Poydras Corridor. It's very similar to Park Avenue in New York City. It's a divided street, and we set sculptures in on the median. And I worked with the Parks and Recreation Department on each spot and engineered the bases to their specifications, and each base stayed, and then it was a rotating show. If a new sculpture came in, mainly I curated it. I picked the artist because I knew what would look good in a particular area versus just putting a sculpture there that didn't really make sense regarding size. It's everything is a little bit site specific, but it's according, if there's a 40-story building next to or the Superdome, as a matter of fact, you don't want to put a 5-foot sculpture there. So we were putting 25-foot sculptures next to the larger areas. And if the next sculpture came in and it was a horizontal sculpture, we would take that base out and pour a new base. So each one was selected as we went, you know, whichever fit on that. Economically, it was easier to reuse the same ones, but that's not always the case. And then after it's all over with, if the project doesn't move forward, all the bases are moved. And that was my responsibility to remove or to actually, it's a law. It's an old 1920s oil field law. If you go into someone's property and you drill a well, when you leave, you have to put it back in its original environment and state. So my commitment to the city was if my project stopped, everything would go back to its natural state. In the New Orleans case, the sponsor bought me out, and that group, which is the foundation, moved forward, and they're buying work and placing it. So I moved out of New Orleans in 2000, right at COVID, 2019. And then that's when I was working in a few other places, Tucson for one, where I met Rick. But yes, bases come and go, to answer your question.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any examples of your work?
Yeah, I sent a PowerPoint, and we've had a computer malfunction. Y'all's computer wouldn't download the PowerPoint, but it's the presentation of the main street in New Orleans. And so I asked Rick and the other gentleman who called if he could just forward that message to you guys, and y'all could all look at the PowerPoint on your phones. Yes.
Michael, it's really great to hear your presentation. I'm fascinated by this. I don't know that much about sculptures, and I appreciate your generosity and being willing to help us. Can you tell us about your background? And I assume you're a sculptor, and what it's like to become a sculptor, and maybe some of your experiences with that?
Well, it's definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. There's no rules, there's no regulations. My brother is a orthopedic surgeon, and you know, when he graduated college, he went on to medical school. When he graduated medical school, he went on to specialty upper extremities, and this and that. Well, when I graduated, I didn't know what to do. You know, people said, learn business. How do you do that? I'm trying to be an artist. You know, you're 22, 23 years old. And then I finally met an artist who I thought was, well, he was famous or is famous. And I was talking to him, and he says, well, the first 10 years don't count. So imagine being 22 saying, oh, gee whiz, I won't make any money until I'm 32 years old. So it just made me strike out and start knocking on doors and meeting people and going to events. And it's in the end, it's a who you know project. It's a who you know life. It's sales, which I never anticipated being, but yeah, you have to get out there and meet people and people who are buying your art and that sort of stuff. And it's extremely political as well. And I never thought about that either. You know, who's being invited into major museum shows, who's being selected for the Whitney Biennial, that sort of thing. And if you look at the Whitney Biennial, 90% of the artists are either from Los Angeles or New York. You know, the rest of the country is skipped. So it's very difficult to network yourself from South Texas. Although there are some really great artists who came from Texas, Robert Rauschenberg being one. He came from Port Arthur. And then what happened in my life that was a major pivot point. I'd moved into a new studio, and across the street was a 3-acre vacant lot. So I thought that would be a good place to put a picnic table for one. Once I did that, there was quite a few homeless people in the area, and I hired them to clear out the 3 acres. Next thing we did was we started putting sculptures in, and that trained me on my organizational skills. I went to the owner of the property, which was a bank in Houston, and asked them if I could rent the property. And I rented it for $1 a year and provided liability insurance for $1 million. And that was my first step into the public realm. Within a year, we had 25 or so sculptures, and it went viral. The newspaper covered it. And then an architect from Dallas invited me to be on a project. They were doing a sculpture project in that area. And then we won that. And one thing led to another. You know, it's word of mouth, working with architects or landscape architects. Whoops. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, we're here. It's just
Okay.
one of
Just-
our other members.
And
You-
so after 2 or 3 sculpture projects, I just started to do them on my own. And collectors, there's a lot of large ranches in South Texas or in Texas. And one guy had quite a few acres and had a landscaping budget. And he asked me if I could help him out making his backyard, which was 25 acres, into a sculpture park. So that's how I got into doing things for private collectors. And, you know, just one thing led to another, but it's a lifetime. It's absolutely a lifetime. So you just sit down, hunker down, and keep working. And primarily because I know how hard it is to be an artist or start to make a living as an artist without ever having another job or not wanting to teach in a university system. When I would work with other artists, the key was to teach them how to do what I do and how to pay it forward when they make money. And one particular artist that I selected in New Orleans was a janitor. And last year he probably made $250,000 in sales off his work. So getting an artist from the studio to a public venue is an unknown. They don't know how to make a presentation to the city council. They don't know how to make a presentation to the design advisory committee. And so it's an uphill climb. And when I teach them how to do this, it cuts 5 years off their life or their time making these presentations. It takes a long time to figure this out. So the 80 or so artists that I've worked with all have a knowledge of the public realm and how to make a presentation. And then the key is to pay it forward. I think I've been pretty successful with the 100 or so total artists in New York. In New Orleans, 93 or 4 of them have been extremely successful. So I'm proud of that. And that was my charge. So it all goes back to starting out when you're a kid wanting to be an artist, and figuring out what to do with your sculpture. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be designing and building sculpture parks, but one thing leads to another, and everything an artist does is art. Everything's a historical document. Everything I touch, for instance, New Orleans changed the city of New Orleans forever. It's now food, music, and art. And I'm real proud of that as well, which wasn't my intention, but I got 2 keys to the city, one from the city council and one from the mayor, Mitch Landrieu. I won the Downtown Development District Chairman's Award, competing against the Superdome for its lighting, stuff like that. So all these things just happen. But as they say, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. Exactly what we wanted to hear.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
How's the financing work? When you talk about artists placing their works in a space, how is that? Do they pay for it? Does some umbrella organization pay for it? How does that work financially? And I guess if they sell the work, then they get part of the proceeds. How long does it take for them for a sale to mature? Can you speak to a little bit about how that end of the sculpture park business works?
On average, in my experience, it takes 3 years to sell a monumental sculpture if you just put it out there and it sets. But if you have 100 sculptures out there, you start to get on the mill, and you could sell one every 6 months. It takes about 2 years for the project to reach maturity for the community, for the region, for the newspapers and what have you, to start talking about it. I think I was working on the city of New Orleans for 2 years before anything happened. Also, I didn't ask for any money from the city or anyone, collectors, anyone. I provided all the funds. I raised all the money from collectors and such. In your area, there would have to be seed money. The artist, I would, wherever the money is, the artist would be paid for shipping, installation, and removal of work. Sometimes they would require a fee to have it on loan, but most of the time they're happy to install, loan you the piece for a year with an option to renew the next year. And with my success in sales, in my projects, most of the artists are happy to do that. There is state money that's available from the New Hampshire Commission on the Arts. I don't know if there's any regional things. I would imagine that Dublin would be considered an underserved community as far as arts would be concerned. So in Texas, for instance, if I worked at in a small city and it's an underserved community, there would be a budget of anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000 in matching funds for that community. And if they don't use it, it goes to the general fund again. So, and every year there's a new amount in underserved community funds. It's an untapped market, actually. And two of the projects I did, one in a small town, Goliad, Texas, and another a small town, Beeville, Texas. Both were underserved communities. We qualified for $10,000 grants, matching grants. And once you get a $10,000 matching grant, it's easy to match. People feel comfortable putting money in when the state matches it. So there's different ways. In New Orleans, for instance, the mayor's office said, well, there's not one tree we shake 7 or 8 trees and we'll find the money for you. Once that happened, different foundations, the Gold Ring Family Foundation made donations. In the very, very beginning, I had a nonprofit called Mariposa Arts Foundation. But with these days, with so many ways to raise money and working with different organizations to have them be the umbrella, that's what I did. It's a lot easier for me to work under a nonprofit umbrella and submit invoices to them. If any money is raised, they become the bank. That umbrella becomes the bank. I submit invoices and everything's on record, and then I get reimbursed or the artist gets reimbursed. So if an artist spends $5,000 on material, $3,000 on shipping, $2,000 on installation, he would submit that $10,000 to me. I would submit it to the umbrella organization. The umbrella organization would reimburse him. So there's a checks and balance there. And I'm not the accountant, which is a whole nother job unto itself. I was fortunate enough for 10 years to have a former IRS agent be my accountant. So she would tell me, when I leave the house, use this credit card. When I return, put it up. So everything was accounted for on that specific trip, installation and such like that. So I would organize, you guys would organize some sort of checks and balance. And we would, that's the, y'all would be the bank. So it's you know, you just have to figure out where the money would come from and who would put some money up first. But there has to be seed money. You know, New Orleans got $23 million of art for free. If the museum had gotten all the same art as I brought into town, it would be, they couldn't afford it. It would have been, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And over the course of 15 years, I don't think I spent $300,000 placing all the art. And that's including reimbursing myself and paying for all the materials, paying for all the shipping, and paying for all the installation. One reason is because I did everything myself with my crew. The museum, they have to hire everyone to do that. So if something cost me $10,000, it would cost the museum $100,000. And that's the difference. You know, it's just like building a house. If you built the house yourself, how much money are you going to save? If you hired a contractor with his crews, it's going to at least be 20 to 30% more. It's the same thing.
Well, I think that's been amazing, Mike. We're at our usual ending time here, and we respect your time as well. Were those representative numbers, like order of magnitude $10,000 to get a sculpture there and with the allowance for removal? Or is that just a random number you picked?
No, it's pretty accurate. There is a sliding scale. I have to fly up. So basic cost, you're looking at a $400 or $500 flight, a rent car, hotel, organizing the same thing for the artist. So just the nuts and bolts of it, it might be $5,000. But I don't see anything going beyond $20,000 for any sculpture. Insurance runs about $2,500 a year for liability. It's a $2 million with $5 million aggregate. The art insurance, vandalism, theft, that sort of thing, that's $3,000 to $3,500 a year. So those costs are fixed. So you're looking at, if you average each installation, probably 10% of that are the fixed costs, insurance and things. And it's just like driving a car. You have to pay car insurance or insuring your house. Hopefully you never have to look at contact your insurance company. You just go in and it's a fixed thing. So, but I would think, if you had $100,000 budget, that would be probably everything you would ever need for 2 years. So 50,000 a year or something like that. But bare bones, once I got up there and looked around and there was a community of helpers and organization. For instance, when I worked at the Tulane campus, 35 students came out. So I worked with the colleges, and then I worked with the college art department. And I worked with the college architectural department, and they all came up with different designs and things like that. So it all goes into education as well. In Haverstraw, we worked with the elementary schools and all the way up through high school, and then the local arts community. So it's not just going in and putting something in an area. It's trying to work with the entire community.
Amazing. Greg, you want to
I think that's it. All right.
finish up here? But anyway,
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you, Rick, and let's see how it goes.
Yep. And I'll get the slides out to everybody so they can see those. We'll get them posted on our website as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.